My name is Ocean. I'm 28 years old, and my mother once told me, "You'd ruin your cousin's wedding just by showing up." Those words still echo inside me like a crack in the glass, sharp, jagged, impossible to forget. It started on an ordinary spring afternoon in my Portland condo. Sunshine streamed through my windows, painting everything golden, but all I felt was cold. I had been scrolling through Instagram, sipping coffee, when a series of smiling faces froze my breath. Fiona, my younger cousin, was surrounded by relatives, raising champagne flutes, laughing under strings of fairy lights in my aunt's backyard. A bridal shower, 34 guests, every cousin, every family friend, even great-aunt Judith, who needed a walker. Everyone, except me. The realization didn't just sting, it hollowed me out. Just last month, I had sent Fiona a handwritten congratulations card with pressed flowers from my balcony garden. I even offered to design her invitations, free of charge, as a gift. I thought we were close. But looking at those photos, I knew this wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. Confused and trembling, I called my mother. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice calm but dismissive. "There was a shower for Fiona yesterday," I asked. "Why wasn't I invited?" A long pause, then a sigh. "Ocean, don't take this personally. Marlene thought you'd make it all about yourself. Fiona deserves her day without drama." Her words landed like a slap. Drama? That's what they thought of me? My own mother? I ended the call before she could say more, dialing Aunt Marlene immediately. She didn't deny it either. "You shouldn't be there," she said coldly. "Fiona deserves a day that's just hers." I remember standing at my kitchen window staring at the city skyline, realizing my family had made a choice. Appearances over love, image over connection, and in their polished narrative, I didn't fit. The truth cut deeper than I wanted to admit. At Thanksgiving, they had praised Fiona's promotion at the bank, called her the golden one. When I mentioned saving $150,000 for my condo, they brushed past it. My achievements were always minimized, while hers were toasted with champagne. It was as if my existence disrupted their perfect story. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those smiling faces, the champagne flutes, the floral centerpieces. My mother's words replayed in my head. Not personal, Ocean. But it was personal. It always had been. And as I sat there wide awake in the early hours of morning, one question seared itself into my mind. If my own family had erased me from their story, was it finally time to write one of my own? Sleep never came that night. I lay in bed with the glow of my phone burning against the dark, the screenshot of Fiona's bridal shower photos replaying in my mind like a cruel slideshow. 34 guests, 34 reminders that I was deliberately erased. By morning, exhaustion gave way to something sharper, resolve. I wasn't going to sit quietly while my family rewrote me out of their narrative. If I was drama in their story, then I needed to hear it directly, not through whispers or half-truths. I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs, my stomach tightening with every mile. The spring air was fresh, cherry blossoms lining the streets, but I felt none of its beauty. My mom answered the door in gardening gloves, dirt smudged on her cheek. She blinked at me as though my arrival was unexpected. "Ocean?" What a surprise. "Come in, I was just about to make some tea." I stepped inside, my eyes catching the framed family photos on the mantel. Fiona's smile dominated nearly all of them. In some, I was barely visible, half hidden in shadows, blurred or cropped to the edge. It struck me then, this erasure had been happening long before the bridal shower. I pulled out my phone, my hand trembling only slightly. "I got an interesting message yesterday," I said, scrolling to the screenshot. It wasn't meant for me, but it came through. I held the screen up to her. The group chat message glared back. "Good thing we didn't invite Ocean. Less drama." Her face shifted not with shock, but resignation. She didn't even try to deny it. "We all agreed it would be easier this way. Fiona deserves a wedding without complications." Complications. The word cut deeper than any insult. "You mean me?" My mother sighed, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her pants. Don't be dramatic. Maybe you should make other plans for that weekend in May. I stared at her, stunned by how casual she was about casting me aside. It wasn't just rejection, it was betrayal dressed as practicality. By the time I left the house, my hands were cold and numb on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with a notification as I reached my apartment. Another group message. Deleted before I could open it, but not before I saw the preview. Bring Fiona's wedding flowers on Saturday. So not only had they excluded me, they had also been talking about me behind my back, making sure everyone knew their version of the story. That evening, I sat across from Isla, my best friend, at a Thai restaurant. She listened as I laid everything out. The screenshots, the calls, the humiliation. Unlike my family, she didn't interrupt, didn't dismiss. Ocean, that's textbook manipulation, she said, her voice steady. They're gaslighting you, making you believe you're the problem when they're the ones excluding you. That's not family love, that's control. Her words poured into me like water on parched ground. For the first time, I felt seen. But even as Isla's comfort warmed me, my phone kept buzzing. Messages from distant cousins, each one accusing me of causing drama during Fiona's special time. That was the moment I understood. The narrative had already turned. My family wasn't just excluding me, they were rewriting the story entirely, painting me as jealous, unstable, toxic. And people believed them. The fallout came swiftly. 3 days later, Barton Media canceled a contract with my design business. Their email was polite, but the message was clear. We've heard you can be difficult to work with. I traced the connection. Barton's marketing director played tennis with my uncle. The whispers had spread into my professional world. Another potential client pulled out days later. $27,000 in projected income evaporated, all because my family couldn't bear to let me exist in their carefully curated picture. At night, I sat hunched over my computer, redesigning my portfolio website like rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. Each pixel shift felt like clawing back some small control over a life spinning out. But when the anonymous text came through on a Sunday morning, it shattered what little composure I had left. Some people aren't stable enough for formal events. Your absence is a kindness to everyone. I knew the phrasing. It was Aunt Marlene's signature cruelty, cloaked as concern. My phone slipped from my hand as tears blurred the screen. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Isla standing there with a bag of takeout and a stack of wedding magazines. "I know you're in there," she called softly. "Let's plan something worth celebrating." Something about joy, not appearances. For the first time in days, my chest loosened. Maybe blood had rejected me, but chosen family was still knocking at my door. And yet, deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Because when my mother's silver sedan pulled into my lot minutes later, I understood. The real confrontation was just beginning. My mother didn't knock softly. She pounded like the door owed her something. Isla slipped into the kitchen, clutching the paper bag of Thai food, giving me a look that said, "Do you want me to stay?" I nodded. I didn't want to face my mother alone. When I opened the door, she stepped in without waiting. Her eyes swept over my apartment, taking in the sketches pinned to my wall, the unopened takeout on the counter, the faint smell of wine from last night's half-empty glass. She didn't greet me. Instead, she sat primly on the couch, her handbag balanced on her knees like a gavel. "This has gone far enough, Ocean," she said. "You need to stop this spectacle." Spectacle? I stayed standing, arms crossed. "You mean asking why I wasn't invited? Why my own family erased me?" Her lips pressed tight. "Fiona's invitations are already printed. The wedding will be beautiful. You need to let this go." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. They erased me, destroyed my reputation, cost me my clients, and now she wanted peace. Peace at my expense. "This isn't about an invitation," I said quietly. "It's about years of being treated as less than. As if I don't matter." Her gaze sharpened. "If you can't support Fiona's happiness, maybe you're not the daughter I thought you were." The words should have broken me. Instead, they illuminated something. She had always been measuring me against Fiona, and I had always been found lacking. I straightened my shoulders. I'm exactly the daughter you raised. I just stopped accepting the role you assigned me. For a flicker of a second, she looked startled, almost as if she saw me for the first time. But the moment passed. She stood, smoothed her slacks, and left without another word. The door clicked shut. My knees nearly buckled, but Isla's hand was on my arm instantly. She's gaslighting you, Isla said firmly, trying to twist your reality until you doubt yourself. Don't give her that power. Her words steadied me. For a brief moment, I felt safe, but safety didn't last long. The next morning, 3 private messages popped up on my phone, cousins I barely knew, all parroting the same line. Why are you creating drama? Marlene said you refused your invitation. The narrative was spiraling faster than I could catch it. By the time Grandma called, disappointment heavy in her voice, I realized how complete the smear campaign had become. Sweetheart, she said, Marlene told me you were too jealous to attend. Is that true? Grandma, I whispered, I was never invited. But she didn't believe me. The phone went dead in my hand. That night, as I sat hunched over my laptop, an idea formed. If my family wouldn't let me exist in their story, maybe I needed to write a new one. A celebration not about them, but about me. Something small, intimate, authentic. Isla loved the idea. Let's plan your own event, she said, pulling out the wedding magazines she had brought. Not as competition, as reclamation. For the first time in weeks, a spark of excitement replaced the ache in my chest. I began sketching mock invitations, blending script fonts with pressed flower motifs from my garden. It felt like breathing again. But just as hope bloomed, betrayal followed. 2 days later, I got a call from Barton Media's HR manager, the company that had canceled my contract. Her voice was polite but firm. Ms. Reed, I wanted to follow up. We received information from a close associate, Isla, I believe, that you've been under immense stress, unstable even. We decided it was best to step back. The world tilted. Isla? My Isla? My best friend who had sat in my kitchen telling me I was being manipulated? I hung up quickly, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. When Isla came by that evening with her easy smile and another bag of Thai food, I stared at her like a stranger. Did you talk to Barton about me? I demanded. Her smile faltered. What? Ocean number. Why would I? Because they told me you did. They said you told them I wasn't stable enough to work with. Her eyes widened, hurt spilling across her face. I would never. You know me, but doubt had already seeped in. My family had already poisoned every corner of my life. Was Isla another casualty? Or another conspirator? I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and it rooted itself deep. That night, alone on my balcony, I stared at the city lights, torn between 2 possible truths. Either my best friend had betrayed me, or my family had planted the lie to destroy the last ally I had left. Either way, the walls were closing in. And somewhere between betrayal and suspicion, I realized the real battle wasn't about a wedding anymore. It was about survival, my sanity, my career, my story. And I wasn't sure which part of me would still be standing when the war was over. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying Barton's words in my head. Isla told us you weren't stable. Was it true? Had my best friend betrayed me? Or was this another lie planted by Marlene to isolate me completely? By morning, the doubt felt unbearable. Isla texted me, "Coffee later?" But I couldn't bring myself to answer. Instead, I buried myself in work, tweaking design layouts I could barely see through my tears. The phone buzzed again, this time a number I didn't recognize. Westerly Home Goods, another potential client. For one breathless second, I felt hope. Maybe they wanted to hire me. Maybe things were turning. But the voice on the other end was cold. "We've decided to go in another direction," the woman said. "We've heard concerning things." I hung up without asking for details. I already knew. The rumors had spread, leaking like poison into every corner of my professional life. By the time the sun set, I had lost 2 major contracts and nearly $30,000 of projected income. My career, my independence, was collapsing under a narrative I didn't even write. That evening, Isla showed up at my door again, holding Thai food like an olive branch. "Ocean, please," she said when I didn't open right away. "Talk to me." "Whatever you heard, it isn't true against my better judgment." I let her in. She set the food down, her hands trembling. "I don't know what they told you," she said, "but I swear I would never betray you." I studied her face, searching for cracks. "Barton said you called me unstable." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's a lie." "Ocean, don't let them win. They want you to doubt me, to doubt yourself. That's how abusers keep control." Her words hit me like a tide, half comfort, half confusion, because I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the seed of suspicion had been planted too deep. "I don't know who to trust anymore," I whispered. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "Then trust yourself." "That's all you need." For a moment, the room went still. Maybe she was right. Maybe the betrayal wasn't hers. It was my family's all along. But before the moment could settle, my phone buzzed again. A new message lit the screen. "Some people aren't stable enough to attend formal events. Your absence is a kindness." The same phrasing, the same cruel concern. And this time, it came from a blocked number. I slammed the phone face down, my chest heaving. Isla picked it up, scrolling quickly. Her jaw tightened. "This is them. Marlene, maybe your mom. They're pushing you to break." I sank into the chair, my body trembling. "They've already broken me," I said. "They've taken my family, my work. What's left?" Her eyes softened. "What's left is you. And you're stronger than they know," but I didn't feel strong. The next days blurred together in a fog of anxiety and exhaustion. I avoided the coffee shop where Marlene's bridge club met. I shopped at a different grocery store just to avoid my mother's friends. I documented every cruel message in a leather-bound journal, as if keeping records could keep me sane. One night at 3 a.m., I sat at my computer, redesigning my website for the 10th time. Each pixel shift felt like grasping at control, even as everything else slipped away. And then, an idea flickered. A wild, desperate idea. If they wanted me erased from Fiona's wedding, maybe I didn't need their event at all. Maybe I could plan something else, my own celebration. Not of marriage, but of survival, of authenticity. The thought terrified me, but it also lit a spark in the darkness. The next morning I told Isla. She leaned back in her chair, eyes wide. "Do it. Plan your own day, not to compete, just to reclaim your voice." I hesitated. But what if they see it as proof I'm jealous? What if it makes things worse? She shook her head. "They'll twist anything, Ocean. So stop living for their version of you." Her conviction steadied me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of control return. That afternoon, I began sketching again. Not logos or ad campaigns, my own invitations. Hand-lettered, pressed with flowers from my garden. Something intimate, something true. It wasn't about revenge. It was about choosing myself. But even as I traced the curves of the letters, I knew it wouldn't be simple. My family wouldn't let me step out of their narrative quietly, because in their eyes, my freedom was the greatest betrayal of all. Once the decision was made, a strange calm settled over me. For weeks, I had felt like a passenger in my own life, dragged wherever my family's narrative pulled me. But sketching those invitations, hand-drawn lettering, pressed flowers from my balcony garden, felt like grabbing the steering wheel again. Isla leaned over my shoulder as I worked. "This," she said softly, "this feels like you. Not a reaction, a creation." Her words carried me through the long hours of planning. Mateo, a photographer friend of hers, offered to help with logistics. Thomas volunteered to handle the wine. Gianna wanted to bring flowers from the farmer's market. Piece by piece, what started as a fragile idea began to look like an actual event, an intimate gathering of 18 people, the ones who truly cared. For the first time in months, I felt excitement without bitterness. But peace never lasts long in my family. One evening, as the sky turned lavender over the city, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Ocean. Aunt Marlene's clipped voice came through, coated in artificial sweetness. I hear you're planning a little party of your own. My stomach tightened. It's not a party. It's a celebration. A small one. Silence, then a low laugh. How unfortunate. Fiona's wedding date has been moved. May 15th. The exact same day as your little gathering. For a second, I couldn't breathe. That's impossible. Fiona's wedding is in June. Was, Marlene corrected. Now it's May. Everyone's been informed. Everyone except you. Her pause was deliberate, each word dripping with menace. So you see, Ocean, you're forcing people to choose sides. Think carefully about what that looks like. She hung up before I could respond. The silence in my apartment rang louder than any scream. Within minutes, Isla appeared from the kitchen, concern etched on her face. What happened? I told her. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. Isla's eyes narrowed. They moved the date just to crush you. That's not coincidence, Ocean. That's war. The word sat heavy in the air. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My instinct screamed at me to cancel, to avoid another public humiliation. But then I thought of those invitations, the careful lettering, the pressed flowers. I thought of Thomas offering to select wines, Gianna eager to arrange bouquets. People had chosen to stand with me, not out of duty, but love. And for once, I didn't want to back down. The next morning, I called Matteo. We're keeping the date, I said firmly. You're sure? He asked. Yes, anyone who wants to celebrate Fiona can go there. Anyone who wants to celebrate with me will come here. I won't rearrange my joy to fit their judgment. Even saying the words felt like reclaiming oxygen I hadn't realized I was missing. But my family didn't take my defiance quietly. The messages came in waves, accusations of selfishness, guilt-laden pleas about Grandma's health, threats about my reputation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about choosing myself. But even as I traced the curves of the letters, I knew it wouldn't be simple. My family wouldn't let me step out of their narrative quietly, because in their eyes, my freedom was the greatest betrayal of all. Once the decision was made, a strange calm settled over me. For weeks, I had felt like a passenger in my own life, dragged wherever my family's narrative pulled me. But sketching those invitations, hand-drawn lettering, pressed flowers from my balcony garden, felt like grabbing the steering wheel again. Isla leaned over my shoulder as I worked. This, she said softly, this feels like you. Not a reaction, a creation. Her words carried me through the long hours of planning. Matteo, a photographer friend of hers, offered to help with logistics. Thomas volunteered to handle the wine. Gianna wanted to bring flowers from the farmer's market. Piece by piece, what started as a fragile idea began to look like an actual event, an intimate gathering of 18 people, the ones who truly cared. For the first time in months, I felt excitement without bitterness. But peace never lasts long in my family. One evening, as the sky turned lavender over the city, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Ocean. Aunt Marlene's clipped voice came through, coated in artificial sweetness. I hear you're planning a little party of your own. My stomach tightened. It's not a party. It's a celebration. A small one. Silence, then a low laugh. How unfortunate. Fiona's wedding date has been moved. May 15th. The exact same day as your little gathering. For a second, I couldn't breathe. That's impossible. Fiona's wedding is in June. Was, Marlene corrected. Now it's May. Everyone's been informed. Everyone except you. Her pause was deliberate, each word dripping with menace. So you see, Ocean, you're forcing people to choose sides. Think carefully about what that looks like. She hung up before I could respond. The silence in my apartment rang louder than any scream. Within minutes, Isla appeared from the kitchen, concern etched on her face. What happened? I told her. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. Isla's eyes narrowed. They moved the date just to crush you. That's not coincidence, Ocean, that's war. The word sat heavy in the air. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My instinct screamed at me to cancel, to avoid another public humiliation. But then I thought of those invitations, the careful lettering, the pressed flowers. I thought of Thomas offering to select wines, Gianna eager to arrange bouquets. People had chosen to stand with me, not out of duty, but love. And for once, I didn't want to back down. The next morning, I called Matteo. "We're keeping the date," I said firmly. "You're sure?" he asked. "Yes, anyone who wants to celebrate Fiona can go there. Anyone who wants to celebrate with me will come here. I won't rearrange my joy to fit their judgment." Even saying the words felt like reclaiming oxygen I hadn't realized I was missing. But my family didn't take my defiance quietly. The messages came in waves, accusations of selfishness, guilt-laden pleas about Grandma's health, threats about my reputation.